Hello, Christophe.
Hello, Benjamin.
Thank you so much for taking your precious time to come visit us at the Dedale office in Paris. We've been wanting to organize this for quite a while, considering your vast, deep experience in the beautiful world of healthcare technology. Been wanting to get your perspectives and get to know you and also introduce you to the wider group. And thanks a lot for taking the time doing this today, Christophe. Many people know you already because you are a key participant in the healthcare software ecosystem in France and wider than France as well. But maybe for those that don't know Christophe well, would it be possible to get the quick intro about yourself?
Sure. So I've been working mainly in the B2B industry, software industry, for the past close to 40 years right now, and started in the healthcare IT industry 20 years ago, when I joined McKesson as a VP to run both the French and the Dutch businesses, which were both coming from previous acquisition and were both in the more focused on the hospital IT side of things. And so I've been working 7 years at McKesson. Then we had a carve out of the French business in 2014. A little bit more than 10 years ago. And so I've been working, I stayed on board as a chief exec. We worked with 2 private equity companies, so very different setup. Same company, same customers, same products, but very different setup, especially for the chief exec than I was. This business has been sold ultimately to La Poste, French Post, something like 3 years ago. And on the personal side, investing quite a lot of time in this industry as a mix of investor, advisor, board member, depending again on the setup. And I've been working with, I would say, several dozens of European healthcare IT companies, most of the time to advise the chief exec, and a couple of private equity investors to better understand the business.
Cool. Thanks a lot for this introduction, Christophe. For the latter part of your experience, which is also your current occupation, do you have some specific ones that you'd like to explain, elaborate on, or fun experiences that you've had doing this for the past few years?
You mean in terms of stories? It's very different. I've been I would say a corporate officer for most of my professional time, working with large companies with a set of values and priorities. With private equity players, you find another world of opportunities, discussions, still looking at companies and trying to improve companies. And this is where I understood that in fact, I was driven by value creation. It's not something that you learn at school, especially when you're a techie. I'm a techie, by training, and I became then a sales and marketing. But I understood that I was obsessed, like private equity companies, by value creation with pretty good companies. And this segment is a very interesting one. We have a mix of defensive and offensive innovation challenges, which I like very much. What is funny is to look at an industry where you're supposed to be an expert or have a good knowledge and look at it from the eyes of multiple chief exec in various segments, in various shapes, forms, size, countries sometimes, and also to look at it from the world of finance viewpoint, which is also key in such an industry to make it a much larger segment, because at the end of the day, it's still, when you look a broad view, it's still a small segment. And as you mentioned already in your presentation, it's very regulated, it's very fragmented, even at product level. And so you cannot be an expert on everything. So for me, it's like making my MBA at the end of my career. So and looking at a lot of different things and being inspired also by a lot of different leaders.
Amazing. Thank you for this, Christophe, and wonderful for us, all of us, to capitalize on your experiences, to get a bit of your viewpoint on this. Good transition, what you mentioned just before, on a space that is vast but very complex, sometimes can look small and niche as well. Probably one of the areas of software and technology that is also seen as having the most local factor or dimension in it. How would you describe the healthcare software space? What are dimensions that make it so special, so attractive in a way, but also so challenging at times as well?
Yeah, no, it's attractive because first, in terms of aim, objectives. You are doing something that is very useful for the population. So you, especially when you work in segments like the hospital IT, you will be faced with things like that in your life at some stage, and you see the inefficiencies quite often, especially in this country. But it's often the case in many countries. So not only at hospital level, but at global level, for the patient, for the providers, for the authorities and the financiers of this system, it's highly unproductive right now. Despite the lack of technology, mainly because we put a lot of IT things, but it's also the IT systems are also totally fragmented, and you can hardly have a view from the top. And if you are the customer, the patient, quite often, it's also not very satisfying right now. So it's an industry where digitization will very likely change a lot of things for both the patients themselves, but also for the payers, and we are all payers at the end of the day. We all of us pay, and money is not properly used right now. So it's a great challenge. Then, if you look at the industry, yes, it's specific because it's complex. It's very complex. We can talk about what you would have at an hospital level, for example, in terms of apps, number of apps, or just number of lines of code. It's just incredible. And you have IT a little bit everywhere. So it's complex, it's fragmented, as I said, just because nobody can address everything at this stage in all the countries, all the segments, all the needs. And it's also highly regulated. There's a mix that is not easy to catch, in terms of efficiency, especially because R&D is the name of the game in this industry. R&D is very expensive, especially in very specific segments, and it's also very local. So you have a very complex needs, but a very small market. So finding the right balance is not easy. And for investors looking for growth, the path to grow is not always extremely easy, or let's say less easy perhaps than in other segments.
Mm. Maybe capitalizing on that, Christophe, and thank you for sharing your overall view. Indeed, it's seen as a super must-have critical segment, so it's not going anywhere. And probably one of the areas where AI is maybe one of the enablers versus a big disruption risk, so which makes it naturally attractive. But exactly as to what you hinted at, it seems like an end market that needs to digitize, but is still relatively slow. Why is that? Is it because of the nature of the customer base with those large and small public bodies that have their own procurement strategies, including on technology, but is it maybe the same with private clients as well? How do you explain this sort of slowness in terms of adoption?
Yeah, very likely one part is linked to the client side or the user side. Mm. You put together a patient and a physician, you will see that there's not a normal appetite for IT. IT can be useful, but if you are my physician, I'm here. I don't want IT. I just want to talk to you. And if you are a physician, it should be the same. And what I see is many physicians right now are more looking at their screens to enhance the records or take advice, whatever. So very likely one part of that is linked to the client side of things and user side of things, which are not extremely IT friendly most of the time. Another part is very likely the lack of financing. We cannot put, I just dream about an Apple in this market. You see what I mean? We don't have an Apple in this market. And Apple has the talent to do very complex things, but you don't see complexity. You just see usability. Obviously, it's more B2C oriented, customer oriented, but the way to simplification, better integration, better interoperability, cost a lot of money. And right now, what I see, at least with the companies I've been working with, it's still a bunch of companies, small companies. You don't have many companies above the 100 million revenue, for example, which could be important. Now we have some. When I started 20 years ago, it was more the 10 million mark. That was hard to reach. Right now, it's more 100. It's still very small to produce fantastic products and global products.
And jumping a little bit into what we meant to discuss after, but it's important to piggyback on what you just said, Christophe. Indeed, it's one of the challenges of Europe as well, where healthcare is probably a sum of rather local markets, still today served by somewhat local vendors, therefore not helping with the scale effect. Do you see this changing? Do you start to see some pan-European approach to this, some champions emerging, or do you still feel we're still in the subscale phase?
It's improving, obviously. Trying to expand even at European level, which is not a huge task, should not be a huge task, is very complex. So we see more champions, or I would say it's local champions or regional champions from time to time. For example, a lot of German companies are a little bit reluctant to go to France. French companies are looking at Germany, don't know how to do it. You need to be local. So frankly, it's not that easy. It improved, but it's not that easy, and you don't have global champions right now. And you can understand that, for example, if you look at the hospital space, for administrative issues, if you take, for example, the billing, the revenue cycle, the payroll or HR issues, it's highly local. So SAP is very good in Germany, but has been unable to penetrate the French market. It's mainly because of that. On the clinical side, so back office, now we move to the front office side, you could argue that the needs of healthcare professionals or patients are not that different from one country to another. So you see more opportunity to go global or to go international, I would say, on the clinical side, a little bit more. Still, after, let's say, 20, 25 years of different tentatives, there's no big European champions right now. We have a couple of regional champions, but not huge champions. And the big American companies are not, Epic and Cerner, for example, are not really strong in Europe as we speak. So it's still, for me, it's still a problem because you need critical mass, to move one step further. You need more consolidation. So we had some, but still, for me, it's not enough.
Okay, so maybe more ways of consolidation to inevitably come.
More ways. Nevertheless, we see in a new category that should be of interest to you and to your clients. There's a new category, a new segment that you can call AI, you can call it data too, and you can call it connectivity. And in France, it's quite easy because you talk about Doctolib, so people start to understand it has been the first one. We're going to have other Doctolibs, I hope. But this new segment, which is a little bit above, like a glue, above the departmental applications for primary care physician, for an hospital, for a nursing home, this layer is new because I would say 15 years ago, there was very few things in this space. And now you have significant companies, significant needs. And in this segment, by the way, will enjoy more growth than the legacy segment. In this segment, I think it's going to be easier to expand in other countries. Very likely because there will be, I think, less fragmentation, less regulation, I hope, for data. So I see more potential for this new kind of companies to expand globally.
Thank you. Super insightful. If we go back to the core, hospital information system core market, which you have been a part of for a while, where would you say we are at in terms of generational evolution? Do you feel that the move from on-prem to SaaS is sort of delivered, or we are still somewhat inside it in terms of AI adoption, AI enablement? Do you start to see some commercial grade things coming up? How do you see the dynamic of what has been going on and where the market is going towards?
Yeah, I think these two things are important. First is the move from on-prem to SaaS, which is complex, can be described in many ways. But for me, this battle is more or less over right now. Even if in Europe you have some resistance, the COVID and the cybersecurity incidents, I think to me helped a lot. The end customers that going SaaS was not that bad and very likely better than doing it, especially when you struggle with resources. It's much better to give it, to key providers, if possible the same ones, not to have too many providers. And at the end, the level of service would be very likely better. So this battle, obviously, we need to continue. We need to move systems, but I see less and less battle, in this field. Where you still have a long way to go is more this connectivity and AI issue. It's these layers above, which are more real-time, which means different technologies too. It's not departmental applications. It's real-time application, very dynamic, very user-oriented, connecting to multiple things. In this area, I think the revolution is still to be made. And I don't think and I was part of that, as one of the champion in the legacy departmental application for both admin and clinical issues, not only for hospitals, because at McKesson and Maincare, we moved from a very solid hospital position to a position more at, I would say, at regional, national level, including the patients, focused on more pathologies. I still think that there's a big battle to drive for AI and connectivity. We are just at the beginning, and I'm not sure that the legacy leaders that we all know will be able to succeed, because with the ongoing vendor consolidation that we saw in the market, we have less companies, they are much larger, but if I look at the roadmap and the skills, they do quite well on stabilizing and improving what they have, but they can hardly address with the right pace, the right skills, the new challenges. And so to me, there will be very likely, as I just said, a new wave of connectivity and AI companies that could go global, especially with the help of PE firms. Because sometimes, especially in France, we have a lot of small companies where the leaders are techies or product guys. Quite often they are not at ease with sales and marketing or with international expansion or M&A, and this is where I think companies of this kind will very likely do better if they have the backup of finance and growth professionals like PE firms.
Super interesting. Thank you, Christophe. Just to double click on one aspect that you've mentioned a few times and that we see as something quite specific to the world we're discussing today is the mention of interconnection, interoperability, indeed from all the work we've done in the past few years on this domain. It's one of the first things that the customers mention as a key pain. The systems just don't talk to each other. The data is broken into pieces, and it's not there yet. It's a little bit counterintuitive because it's an industry where like building pipes should be feasible, and other industries are sort of solving this. To your mind, what makes it extra hard when we think about this space from an interoperability perspective?
We first, I think, believed that we would find platforms taking more space, being so wide, in terms of features that they could cover what, for example, 10, 20, 30 apps right now can provide. We have a little bit of that, both on the admin side, but more on the clinical side, where the electronic patient records are becoming the kind of ERP, a kind of front office ERP to run the clinical activity. It has been, the first religion, I think, but we see the limits of this religion right now. So these platforms are becoming so big that you totally lose the agility required for new themes, because you need to co-develop, for example, with customers. You have to have very short release cycles. So you need a lot of agility, flexibility, and you cannot have that with very big platforms. That's also why we've been working, all the industry has been working on standards. I think we have the standards right now. If you look at the various things that we have on our plate to define how application A and application B should talk, most of the time you have it. But you come back to the key issue, which is about financing. Developing a connector means a lot of money. If I'm a CIO, I'm the CIO of an hospital, I have 50, 100, 200 apps. I would like, for example, when I talk about a user right, when I talk about a patient, I would see the information flowing. I have the report of this patient. I would like it to flow from, the emergency department to the surgery department easily, like that. And don't talk to me about any cost. It should flow. At the end of the day, quite often you need to define connectors between A and B, and you need an integration engine in between. That's a lot of work. That's sometimes development. And there's no money to do it properly because, again, we have this issue of critical mass. You will do it, for example, for 1 to 10 hospitals. If you do it for 100,000 hospitals, there's no issue about the financial model. You will find the money. Right now, you still do it for a very limited number of hospitals. The examples that I gave, you will do it. If you take, for example, the public hospital segment, you have 135 customers. And perhaps you only work with 20. So you will do the development for only 20. So either you ask the hospital to pay for it, and it will be reluctant because it's dozens, hundreds of connectors to be developed, or you need to bet a little bit and try to develop it and sell it. But again, the economic model for me is missing. It's not a technology battle anymore. We have the right things to do it. It's more an economic battle. So at the end of the day, it's a commercial battle for the industry.
Super interesting. Thank you, Christophe, for mentioning that. Also, to look at this from another angle, you have obviously mega deep expertise on the French market, but also you have a view of other geographical areas within Europe. Do you see some differences in terms of maturity, adoption, capacity to solve those problems, or to adopt like new generational type technologies, and also markets that may be organized differently and therefore having some specificities? How do you see those local flavors in Europe?
No, it's a good point, because yes, you have fragmentation, but even between the various blocks, it's tough. For example, just to cover 2 or 3 geographies, it's very challenging. That's why quite often the French people would go to Belgium or would go to Morocco even, just because language is better and it's a smaller country. Yes, but it's not going to change, the company setup valuation, for an investor. If you just take the difference between France and Germany, I will not talk about UK, because UK is like moving a little bit away from Europe in many ways, even if it's a great market with quite high price levels. But if you look at France and Germany, which are quite similar in terms of size, the key themes in this industry are quite different. Germany is very likely 5 to 10 years late, but they do it in a more rigorous way. Yeah. They are still very obsessed about infrastructure issues with their, the gematic equivalent of the agency driving that is still very much about the backbones of things. You did not have this consolidation also at the territory or regional level. So it's still an hospital by hospital view of things, with very few, compared to France, focus on what's happening outside of the hospital. So I think the French side, with at least on the public side, with the setup of the Groupement Hospitalier de Territoire, we went to different needs, more critical mass. So there's one CIO right now, but he would run an average of 8 to 10 hospitals. So there's more people, there's more money, you can consolidate things. And if you think about territory, immediately you think about the other stakeholders. Again, the nursing homes, private clinics that is here, the patients themselves, some healthcare networks. You need to link a little bit everything, because the hospital is the largest one. And if things go bad, the patient will end up at the hospital level. So we saw many initiatives, either driven by the hospitals themselves, the group of hospitals, the territory, the regions, and sometimes at country level, to facilitate a little bit workflows, clinical workflows, at a more global level. It's a trend that you don't see right now in Germany. Same thing for SaaS. I saw much more reluctance to hosted systems, externally hosted systems. Don't talk about SaaS, but just to say, I'm going to give my hosting to somebody else. Yeah. In Germany, it's not important. On the other side, everything about app certification has been extremely quick and quite effective on the German side, where in France we are more reluctant, perhaps due to assurance maladie, the main payer, to the financing of apps. So you have trends like that. If you are an industry player, a software player, it's very tough to balance, because you say, if I want to address Germany, I need to go there, but if I do on French side, I'm more here. So it's tough, and you're already struggling with your own roadmap. The key thing is R&D, is to master your roadmap. We are not into specific installation anymore, specific apps. There's more rigor right now in this field. So the roadmap is the heart of the company. And driving a proper roadmap is key to financial performance. And if you try to run several segments and several countries, it's much more challenging.
Just on this one, Christophe, indeed, if you put yourself in the shoes of those vendors today with indeed finite resources, so many opportunities or things that are possible to do, but then the need to focus. If you think about the vendors and the customer needs, what do you think are like the top critical things that they need to do next, or do better, or get their act together to sort out their challenges?
At least for the new generation of entrepreneurs, quite often I try to teach them to be a little bit more focused, because it's going all over the place. They like very much fail fast forward, themes, which has been a big thing in the US. In this industry, sometimes it's a little bit tough to fail because you're going to lose a couple of years and perhaps your finance will not follow. So I would say more focus, very likely, in terms of segment and R&D priorities. More focus in terms of geos too, because again, it's very risky to go to multiple geographies. And sometimes I see them, we're trying to cover 10 countries. It's not the point. Let's try to succeed with 1 or 2 countries first, but really succeed, and then you will when you will understand the recipe, you will expand. You will tune, obviously, because each country is different. You will tune a little bit the recipe. So I think that's my view. Be more focused, very likely, and think about the economic model, because at the end of the day, everything is about people and money. And I see, especially on the French side, I see people obsessed with the product. Yes, the product is important, but at the end of the day, you see that a lot in M&A, people and the money themes are the most important to succeed.
Super interesting. So words of focus, picking one battle or just a few. Exactly. But being the absolute best.
And work with customers. We did that with a couple of companies I've been working with, like Liffen or Silbo. It's really try to convince flagship customers. Sometimes it takes time to do it. And when you do that, you don't do other things. Sometimes you're not going to get financial reward short term. But if you are with big customers, because selling by reference is key, that's really an enabler to go much, much further in the future. So co-developing or allocating time at all levels. It's not only a technical issue. It's the whole company is focused. I'm working, for example, with this academic. Let's try to succeed with them, and then we'll jump to another one, and the base will grow. And when you are small, I think that's absolutely key to have flagship references.
Thank you so much. And to take the flip side, the contrary, where do you see companies, vendors going wrong? Obviously, not everyone succeeds in this market. It's seen as a tough one. What are recipes for disaster that entrepreneurs, execs should bear in mind?
There's one issue at a certain size. If you want to grow, you can have the temptation of having multiple platforms. You see what I mean? Sometimes to go there or to go in this industry, on this segment, I'm going to add a new platform. And you could end up with dozens of different platforms. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is technology. And as I told you, if you look at the financial models of successful companies, mastering the R&D, P&L line is extremely important. And obviously, at some stage, you have a challenge. Should I stick to one single platform, which is also limiting in many ways, or should I start multiplying the platform? So in any case, you need to have a very good mid-term view of things on the technology front, because this line you need to master definitely. The delivery line, the sales and marketing line for investors are much easier to tune. The R&D line, because we're in the software industry, software, medtech, whatever, is very important.
Very interesting. After having touched upon the R&D part, wanted to ask you also about indeed the go-to-market part. It's a market that is very specific due to the customer base, as you mentioned, varied levels and so on. Do you see patterns of success on the go-to-market side that can also help do well, do better, gain market share, solidify positions? Have you seen things evolve, and where do you see good practices in this space?
Very likely, again, because the industry is fragmented and complex, targeted marketing is absolutely key. And that's a challenge quite often for French companies, because we are not extremely talented at marketing, or we take marketers, but marketers that are not really interested in the products, the finality. They are technicians of marketing. To do well, you need to understand your targets. You need to understand who you want to sell to, either directly or indirectly, and tune the communication, both for existing customers, but also for the prospects that you want to address. So targeted marketing, and it's not easy, is quite important. Adjust the sales model, same thing. You have multiple ways of selling, and it can be very different between some product segments and some others. And so you need to adjust. And so I see some companies, being successful on one thing, they move to another segment and they keep the recipe. Sometimes, no, it's a different recipe on this go-to-market front. Direct versus indirect, same thing. I see many companies either totally resisting to the indirect model because I'm going to lose control, I just cannot do that, I'm going to eat some margin and I need to talk to my customers, which is not fully valid. And at the same time, I see some other companies willing to go indirect, full speed, without the understanding, sometimes without the need, because they could do it by themselves, or without the proper infrastructure to support the resellers, distributors, whatever. It's also quite complex to do a mix of indirect and direct business. And so I see many young companies, and sometimes also pretty large companies, unable to do both. And when you can do both with efficiency, it's very interesting, in terms of boosting your overall sales model.
Very clear. Thank you, Christophe. Going back to the topic of AI, so we've done a study in the past few months on the expected impact on AI on healthcare software overall. I'm going to overgeneralize too much, and a lot of it is unknown yet. We came to conclusion was broadly, and a bit what you said a bit earlier as well, probably more fast new gen advances on the clinical side, because there's a lot of great help that AI can bring. So to help with diagnosis, imaging, like so many new use cases that can be AI powered. Also on indeed the patient to physician relationship, supporting patients actually being physically present with a physician, but with AI supporting with all the tasks that are related. So we see voice to text recognition, support with automated diagnosis, and so on. So seeing that probably a lot will come, including new gen vendors on this side. And then if we go to the more back office part, the administrative part of institution management in healthcare, probably seeing some opportunities with workflow automation, productivity gains, but maybe less new disruption coming in there, or capacity for incumbents to add AI to what they do to maybe do better than today, or be more productive, or give more value to their customers. Do you see that as well? Do you see different things? What is your view of what you see and feel from being in that field so deep?
No, I would agree with your view. I think on the pure clinical AI opportunities, there are many. There are many because personally, I wouldn't like to be a physician right now. It's a fantastic job, but it's very complex. And in this industry, it's very tough to catch up with the knowledge. I see many physicians not even looking at the history of the patient, which I think is stupid. You see that every day when you have older, disabled people around you. You see what should be done, and that is not done. Just lack of time, lack of knowledge to do it. It's a pity, and we, especially in France, trust very much the healthcare professionals. But at the end of the day, if with the same clinical issue you see 3 different professionals, you will have 3 different songs, which personally I just cannot understand. As an engineer, I don't understand that. I have this disease, that's my condition right now. I should have one preferred way, in terms of treatment. What you can see sometimes, if you go to Kaiser Permanente, for example, in the US, as everything is paid by the insurer will tell you what you should do. And there's not multiple models. You should take that, and that, see this person, I will keep all the information, so it's very likely much more efficient. I would not say that this industry in the US is extremely efficient, because there's a lot of money being spent, but it's the right way to look at it. So I think we need more guidance, we need more models on the clinical side. What is dangerous is if we just look at technology, I think it's going to go nowhere and be extremely dangerous. You very likely did it on Google, on ChatGPT. It's just awful. So I'm working, for example, with a young company called Pulse Life, driven by Grégoire. Grégoire is a physician. Just to try to address that, is to be, and I think that's a great cause, is to be the supporting tool of the physician. But it's not a the technology will be extremely good, it's already extremely good, but it's not about technology, it's about embedding all the knowledge of multiple bodies, colleagues, physician stories in one app. And as you said, with technology, you can use it in different ways. Obviously, managing the voice properly, doing transcript, all these things are extremely useful because we also need to give more time to the healthcare professionals. They have limited, if you take primary care physicians, for example, they have very limited time to take care of you. You cannot ask them to go through 5 or 10 years of exams, reports. They just cannot do it. This is where technology will help. I'm convinced with that, but we need to do it with a lot of clinical expertise. And I'm still puzzled with that. Will we have the right level of medical input for these new tools? Because it's going to be a business race for many people.
Very clear. And on the side of the incumbents and on the administrative side, do you see them relatively protected if they work hard on this still, or do you see disruption?
Yeah, I think in this area very likely, I believe much more in embedded AI, which means as a software firm, you need to review a little bit what you're doing, because quite often we still in the story, I'm going to transform paper or Excel, Word, the emails, with tools. You need to go one step further, which is, okay, I have Benjamin. Benjamin, I don't know, He's a billing person, revenue cycle at the hospital. He's a physician at the emergency department. What should I put in front of him as a daily tool to support his work? Which is not exactly the viewpoint of software vendors right now. They more say, we need to manage this information and have this flow because it's regulatory, or I bought or I have a very old tool, which is 20 years old, I just need to upgrade the tool. No, that's not the point. You need to change everything, look at it from the top, and with a strong user productivity, comfort, and security perspective. So it's also a big challenge for software vendors and for all these teams.
Great. One more dimension, Christophe, is, and you mentioned it a while back, on cyber. Indeed, it is a topic that for healthcare has made the headlines. So some hospitals down, or big issues happening here and there, and this is only what we hear about publicly. Yes. I'm sure there's a lot more in the kitchen. Why do you think that is, and why is that so pregnant in the hospital world? And do you think the industry is sort of on the way to find a solution about this, or it's still one of the big challenges for this domain?
It's still one of the big challenges, and we need to address that, because the answer could be, let's not share any data. Even personally, if you ask me, Christophe, if I'm sick, Christophe, do you accept to share your data, knowing that perhaps you have 20% chance of being hacked in the next 10 years? Personally, I would say yes, immediately. I don't care about sharing things, because I know that if my data is available and properly used, which is still not the case, I have more chance to have the right treatment. So we need to fight that, to make sure that data is available. It is not constrained either by the patient himself or by the authorities. So that's a fight. And yes, we are very far from being at the right level, because this cyber industry is going much faster than what our guys at hospital level can do. Yeah. Again, this on the public side, the public hospital side, these groups gave more critical mass. If you are, for example, a small hospital with 200 beds, you can have, on the private side, you can have 2 or 3 guys for IT. And very likely the guys will not be at top-notch level for cybersecurity. If you have a much larger group of, 80, 100, 150 IT people, then you can have a small cyber team addressing multiple hospitals. So again, consolidation is very important, but we are far from being there in terms of staff, required staff, and obviously required resources, including finance. We are very far from other industries like finance or defense. It's totally different. We are far from being at the right level. And we see some financing flowing from the ministry, but frankly, compared to the threat, it's peanuts.
Interesting. So still an open wound that needs work.
Yes, and we need more problems, I think, to address it properly.
Super interesting. Thank you. And maybe final question, Christophe, to open the crystal ball of going into the future. If we, based on everything that we discussed, if we fast forward like 5 to 10 years from now, in which way do you think the world that we discussed today will be different? So you mentioned consolidation, for example, maybe more European champions coming up, maybe some companies getting to the scale that they need at revenue level to actually have the resources to continue to invest on R&D. You mentioned about some adoption of AI, the issue of like data flow, connection, and so on. What will this look like in a few years?
It's a tough question. In terms of industry, what we saw in the past 15 years is the big companies are much bigger, but there are few of them. You have tons of small, very dynamic companies with a lot of good things, but I'm not sure that most of them will do it in the next 10 years. Or they will have to change, they will have to be acquired or integrated or whatever. I miss a little bit the kind of mid-sized companies that have, again, pros and cons, but there's few of them. Companies between, I would say, 5 and 50 million right now, we have less and less, less and less. And they struggle to get bigger. But I think that if it's properly managed, the companies are becoming more professional, more focused. They have more support too. If I look at what I got, in terms of support, 20 years ago compared to what you could get now. Talk about everything and what your owners or could change. What supporting tools you would have online. It's just in terms of training, in terms of capacity of new employees. There's much more potential right now. And I think also there's some negative side of it, perhaps in some case, but having PEs, professional growth firms in this industry is a big plus. If you are, and that's my advice to many chief exec, talk to your competitors, obviously talk to your clients, but also talk to your competitors or what you feel are potential competitors. Talk to people that could potentially support your growth, because alone it's very challenging. There's multiple things to address, and when you are very much focused, like in France, on your product, and actually product and customers, you need people around to grow much faster.
Super interesting. Thank you, Christophe. A lot of words of wisdom. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Probably more exchanges in the future, how we see the story unfold, but a lot to work on and research. And thank you so much for your presence with us today.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you.